Normally, I don't do this, but I felt that it is my ethical duty to not harm you. So, disclaimer, this following video is going to hurt in your brain. It will hurt to watch and listen to this person talk. It will cause you to want to rip out parts of your body. It will make you want to scream and bash things in anger. It will make you want to facepalm and just break everything. But I implore you, don't give in to those emotions. Instead, temper your emotions with logic and reason. I know this guy's gonna test your limits, but you have a pause button, so use it. But do count the amount of times that you get pissed off and have to pause it, and then let me know how many that is, so I can laugh at your pain and be amused by it. Which kind of negates the whole ethical thing that I was saying earlier, but anyways, let's do the video. Here we go.
Well, what proof is there that God exists? The way I would approach this is not in terms of proof.
Okay, so we're off to a fantastic start. We're going to talk about the proof of God, but we're not going to use proof. I mean, that would just be silly. It's so good, I just want to play that clip again. So I'm going to.
Well, what proof is there that God exists? The way I would approach this is not in terms of proof.
Next clip.
Within science, we think in terms of evidence. And evidence typically does not prove that something is true. Rather, evidence provides us with some reason to believe that a scientific hypothesis is true, for example.
Well, he gets this mostly kind of right. Sort of. So let's go over it. The scientific evidence is evidence that serves either to support or counter a scientific theory or hypothesis. This evidence is usually empirical evidence, and thus would be something that we could observe. So I'm gonna guess that he has empirical evidence of God, which is great. So all he has to do is provide that, and then we can just see God directly. I'm sure he's going to give us that, right? I mean, you know, it's not like he's gonna say that there's evidence and then go straight to some argument that's broken and flawed in so many ways that it'll take me like an hour or some stupid amount to explain every single fallacy, or like I have to like break the video into like 4 parts plus, not even mentioning how much time I've wasted just lamenting and complaining about the fact that I'm probably going to have to do this. Spoiler alert, I'm totally going to have to do that because he doesn't have empirical evidence. Here we go. Let's just go to the next part.
So what we're looking for is not absolute proof, but rather looking for different pieces of evidence that together might give us a powerful case for the existence of God. And so the way I would go about this would be to say, well, let's look at various features of our universe and see if they make sense from the perspective of belief in God. If belief in God would provide us with a better explanation of those features of the universe.
So you're assuming your conclusion and then working to prove it, which is exactly the opposite of what science does. You hypothesize, you know, what could explain X, Y, or Z, and then you work to disprove that hypothesis until either you have or you fail to do so, at which point, you know, then you pass it on to others to examine. But you don't have anything of substance to examine here. You have this idea of God, which is this some sort of nebulous idea that you haven't grounded in any sort of anything at all yet. You haven't told us what God is, or how it works, or where it's located, or whatever, anything about it other than the name God or the title God, and that doesn't tell us much of anything. And then you working backwards from that assumption that this thing exists, and that does belief in God help me to make better sense of the universe than not believing in God, as if that is some sort of argument. Making better sense of things is completely non-science. That's nothing to do with science. And many times, reality doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's very hard to understand certain aspects of reality. It's completely opposite to what we thought it would be, or completely foreign to us, or whatever. It's just not what we, it's like, well, we had no idea that that's what it was going to be, but there you go. The fact that the universe is flying away faster and faster than the speed of light, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then it's like, okay, well, let's try to make sense out of it. It's the space in between is what's accelerating. It's like, well, but why is that allowing it to move faster than light? And they're calling that dark matter, and and a lot of it is completely counterintuitive. So it's not about whether it makes better sense or anything of that. It's whether or not the hypothesis or the theory can adequately explain the observations at hand, and then you work to disprove that. But this is not any of that. All this is assuming that the conclusion is true, and then working to prove that the conclusion is true. So yeah, you're going to find all sorts of things that you think support it by doing that. It's bad logic. It's bad. It's not science. It's pseudoscience. So all you're doing, the only reason that you're even bothering with any of that, is because you're using your mantle of I'm a scientist to try to give credit to the things that you're saying that are nonsense. Shame on you.
Or to put it another way, that those features of the universe would be the sort of things we would expect in a universe created by God, but would be very surprising in a universe that wasn't created by God.
And how in the bleep can you hope to ever falsify the idea that it makes sense, if God made it, that this is what we would expect? How in the bleep would you know what to expect without knowing what God is in the first place? So you're working backwards from the pre-assumed conclusion that you have about what God is, how it works, etc., to then say, well, does this fit with that? And then you could do all sorts of mental gymnastics to make it fit. This is bad everything.
Well, perhaps the most fundamental of these is, of course, the existence of the universe itself, because there's a lot of explanation to do to try to explain the very existence of the universe. And if we focus more specifically on the origin of the universe, insofar as we have evidence for the universe having had a beginning, well, this is exactly what we would expect if there's a God. In fact, this is what the Bible teaches us in the first verse, that in the beginning God created the heavens and earth.
Let us with tuneful skill proclaim these generations of the gods, that one may see them when these hymns are chanted in a future age. These Brahmanas produce with blast and smelting like a smith. Existence in an earlier age of gods from non-existence sprang. Existence in the earliest age of gods from non-existence sprang. Thereafter were the regions born. This sprang from the productive power. Now that's found in Riviera in Hinduism. So they're saying that there was a non-existence, and then the gods made things come into existence from their power. So that aligns with the beginning of the universe as well. So I guess Hinduism is also right. Oh, maybe, just maybe, this is an idea, we don't rely on the Holy Book to inform us of how the thing is going to go. It's like, hey, my Holy Book seems to align with it. I mean, it says that the universe began, and the universe actually began. Well, Hinduism also said that. So what? And some other religions have got it right too. But that doesn't mean the whole damn thing is right, you moron.
You moron! Whoa, you're a moron!
So a beginning, evidence for a beginning of the universe, which we have in science, is just the sort of thing we would expect if there's a God. But this is very surprising if there's no God. And
why is that something that you expect if there's a God, but wouldn't expect if there wasn't a God? What difference does that make at all? It sounds like you've taken your idea of what God is and how it works and said, well, I mean, it makes sense if there's a God that it began, because that's what the Bible says, and that doesn't make sense any other way because it just doesn't? What?
many atheists have been motivated by the idea of trying to avoid the idea that the universe had a beginning. But we could also think about other features of the universe. We could think about the order of the universe.
Oh, I see. So if atheists promote an idea, that must mean that the opposite of that idea is true. See, the atheists are saying the universe is infinite, whoever these atheists are, and there isn't a beginning, you see, and they're only saying that, these atheists who are unnamed, because they know that there's a God and stuff, and they're just suppressing it in their unrighteousness, their sinfulness, they're evil atheists, and so anything and everything the atheists possibly can ever say must be the opposite of that, because that's how that works.
Catapult pancakes lobbed at me, syrup and butter, they are killing we. The castle destroyed by yummy dessert. Who'd have thought it could do that much hurt?
One of the things that scientists look for is to discover laws that describe how the universe works. This is fundamentally a part of science. But why should we look for those laws? Why would we expect the universe to be like that, to be so orderly? Well, the early scientists had an answer for this. Many of them were Christians who were looking for laws in the world precisely because they believed in God. They believed in a lawgiver. And so, again, when we find these laws, these scientific laws, and these discoveries are made, this is the sort of thing they expected in a universe that was created by God, but would have been very surprising in a world that wasn't created by a rational agent.
everything I just did just now made more sense than anything that he's just said at all. I have no comments to add to it. I can't even tell you fallacies because, I mean, I can, but at this point, it's so broken, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it's just, this video has broken me. So good job. Thanks for doing that. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore.
Well, what proof is there that God exists? The way I would approach this is not in terms of proof.
Holy shit! Fucking hell!